The rain came down over the city like static on an old wiretap, August 25, 2026. The kind of night where the streetlights looked tired, the alleys kept their mouths shut, and every server rack in town seemed to hum a little lower than usual. I was in the office with cold coffee, warm case files, and a fan that turned like it had seen too much. Tonight's docket was heavy. One fresh murder weapon buried in WireGuard automation. One Ivanti crook already caught in the act. And Jenkins, that old factory floor of the software supply chain, with its file cabinet left open to any mug with a network path and a little nerve. First case, CVE-2026-18577. High severity, CBSS-821. An armed robbery in Enable N Central, with an EPSS probability of 4%. Low whisper from the informant maybe, but this one is already in the KEV book. A repeat offender caught in the act. That changes the color of the whole room. The technical break is an authentication bypass leading to account takeover, tied to an incomplete patch for CVE-2026-18577. The likely weakness sits in the family of CVE-2027, improper authentication, and CVE-863, incorrect authorization. The attack chain is the dirty part. An attacker sends a crafted request to the N Central web application, targeting the same authentication or account recovery logic that the prior patch was supposed to lock down. The server accepts a state, token, route, or identity condition it should reject. The access control layer misreads the caller as legitimate, and the attacker steps into an account without proving who they are. From there, the intruder can take over managed service operations like a crook wearing a stolen badge. The scope is ugly because N Central is remote monitoring and management software used by managed service providers and IT teams to administer fleets of customer endpoints. It can be the keys to the garage. The affected range is N Central versions through 2026.1. An attacker may gain administrative account access, remote management capability, script deployment power, endpoint visibility, and a path toward ransomware staging or downstream customer compromise. Exploitation appears to require network access to the N Central instance, but the point of the case is that authentication can be bypassed, so no valid login should be assumed necessary. If the console is exposed to the internet, the sidewalk is already too close to the vault. Remediation is straight. Upgrade Enable N Central to 2026.320 Ablist or .2 or later, or the vendor-designated release that supersedes 2026.321. Sysadmins and MSP platform owners should move first. Security teams should verify no exposed instance remains unpatched. If patching takes time, restrict access to the N Central web console by VPN, trusted IP allow list, or private management network. Review account changes, new admin users, password reset activity, session creation, API token use, and unexpected automation jobs. Look for logins without normal pre-auth flow, odd user agent strings, requests against authentication endpoints, and administrative actions performed from unfamiliar addresses. In this case, the best detective work starts before the perp learns your schedule. But that wasn't the only body on the slab tonight. Second case, CVE-2026-72603. Critical severity, CBSS 920N. A murder in WG-EZ-1520 with an EPSS probability of 2%. The informant says the street is quiet for now, but a root command injection does not stay quiet long. Not in this town. The technical mechanism is OS command injection, CVE-78 improper neutralization of special elements used in an OS command. The vulnerable component is the client creation path in WG-EZ, a web interface for managing WireGuard. An authenticated user with the client's.create permission enters a client name. Instead of treating that name as plain data, the application writes it into the WireGuard configuration file without safely neutralizing newline characters and directive syntax. The attacker injects newline delimited WireGuard postup directives into the client name field. When WireGuard processes the generated configuration, those injected postup directives run as part of interface handling. Since WireGuard management often runs with elevated privilege, the attacker's command executes as root. One bad name tag becomes a loaded revolver. The affected version called out is WG-EZ 1520-223-2024. The product is popular among small teams, home lab operators, managed service teams, and organizations that want a simple web front end for WireGuard. The attacker needs a valid user role with clients. Create permission, so this is not unauthenticated street crime. It is an insider, stolen account, or a low-privileged user climbing the fire escape. The payoff is root-level arbitrary command execution on the host running WG-Easy. That can mean full VPN server compromise, credential theft, backdoored WireGuard configuration, traffic interception, lateral movement into private address space, or use of the VPN host as a beachhead for ransomware. Remediation should be treated as urgent. Upgrade WG-Easy beyond 15.3.0 to the first vendor release that patches CVE-2026-72603, such as 15.32603, such as 15.326-CC3, such as 1521 or later if that is the published corrected version in your package source. If no patched build is available in your channel, remove clients.create permission from non-admin users, disable self-service client creation, and restrict access to the WG-Easy interface to a trusted management network. DevOps and platform owners should inspect generated WireGuard configuration for suspicious post-up, pre-up, post-down, or pre-down directives, especially lines that appear near client names or contain shell metacharacters. Security teams should look for unexpected root commands, child processes spawned during WireGuard reload, modified WG configuration files, and outbound connections from the VPN host that do not match normal behavior. A client name should never look like a shell script. If it does, the dame is carrying a knife. I barely had time to light another cigarette when the next file landed on my desk. Third case. CVE-2024-21893. High Severity 20224-21893. An armed robbery in Ivanti Connect Secure, Ivanti Policy Secure, and Ivanti Neurons for ZTA. EPSS probability, 100%. That is not a tip. That is the informant kicking in the door. This one is also in KEV, another repeat offender caught in the act. The flaw is server-side request forgery CVE-918 in the SAML component. The attack chain goes like this. An unauthenticated attacker sends a crafted HTTP request to the vulnerable Ivanti appliance, targeting SAML processing endpoints. The SAML component accepts attacker-controlled input that influences a server-side request. Instead of limiting where the appliance can reach, the component makes a request to an internal or restricted resource on behalf of the attacker. The front door stays locked, but the victim's own server becomes the errand boy, fetching restricted material from inside the building. The affected products include Ivanti Connect Secure 9.x and 22.x, Ivanti Policy Secure 9.x and 22.x, and Ivanti Neurons for ZDA. These appliances sit at the perimeter, handling VPN and zero-trust access for enterprises, government agencies, hospitals, universities, and contractors. That makes the blast radius serious. An attacker does not need authentication. No user click is required. Successful exploitation can expose restricted resources, aid reconnaissance, chain with other Ivanti vulnerabilities, support credential theft, and open a path toward remote access compromise. In real-world campaigns, Ivanti edge devices have been targeted for persistence, web shell deployment, account harvesting, and quiet lateral movement after hours. Remediation means applying the Ivanti vendor patch for CVE-2024-21893 for your exact product branch, moving to the fixed 9.x or 22.x build identified in Ivanti's advisory. Teams should also apply Ivanti's mitigation file only as a temporary measure if patching cannot happen immediately. Network teams should restrict management access, reduce public exposure where possible, and verify that SAML endpoints are not reachable beyond business need. Security teams should run Ivanti's external and internal integrity checker tools, review web logs for unusual SAML endpoint traffic, SSRF indicators, requests to local host or internal metadata paths, and signs of web shell placement. Hint for unexpected outbound calls from the appliance to internal hosts. An edge appliance with curiosity is never innocent. The night was far from over. Fourth case, CVE. 2024-2027. Critical severity, CVSS 928, a murder in Jenkins with an EPSS probability of 100%. Another repeat offender caught in the act. Jenkins is everywhere in the software trade, building code, signing artifacts, moving secrets, and feeding deployment pipelines. When Jenkins bleeds, the supply chain checks its pockets. The technical mechanism is arbitrary file read caused by unsafe command parser behavior in the Jenkins CLI. The weakness maps to CVE-22, improper limitation of a path name to a restricted directory, and CVE-200, exposure of sensitive information, with the dangerous parser feature at the center. Jenkins did not disable a CLI feature that treats an argument beginning with an @ sign followed by a file path as an instruction to replace that argument with the file's contents. An unauthenticated attacker connects to the Jenkins CLI endpoint, sends a command argument containing something like an @ sign followed by a sensitive path, and the CLI command parser reads that file from the Jenkins controller file system. The command may fail, but the error path or output can leak file content. The burglar does not need to open the safe if the clerk reads the combination aloud. The affected range is Jenkins Weekly 2441 and earlier, and Jenkins LTS 2.426.2 and earlier. Jenkins has hundreds of thousands of active installations across enterprises, open source projects, cloud build farms, and internal DevOps shops. The immediate impact is unauthenticated, read access to arbitrary files that the Jenkins controller process can read. That can include secret keys, credentials, tokens, source control material, plugin configuration, and cryptographic secrets. In the real world, that becomes supply chain compromise, poison builds, stolen signing keys, cloud account takeover, and lateral movement into developer infrastructure. Depending on configuration and available files, file read may become remote code execution through credential theft or plugin abuse. Remediation is exact and overdue. Upgrade Jenkins Weekly to 2442 or later, or Jenkins LTS to 2426.1.3 or later. If you cannot patch immediately, disable CLI access, block the CLI endpoint at the reverse proxy, and restrict access to Jenkins to trusted networks only. DevOps owns the upgrade. Security owns the hunt. Developers should rotate secrets that may have been exposed, including admin tokens, API keys, SSH keys, webhook secrets, and signing material. Look in logs for CLI requests from unknown IP addresses, unusual command invocations, arguments containing its signs followed by file paths, repeated failed CLI calls, and access to files such as secrets, master.key, credentials.xml, SSH keys, or cloud credential stores. Treat any exposed Jenkins controller as a crime scene until proven clean. They are the stairwells, freight elevators, and master key rings of the modern enterprise. When they break, attackers do not just steal data, they inherit movement, patch N Central beyond 2026.321, lock down WG Easy, and remove risky client creation until corrected. Patch Ivanti and run integrity checks. Move Jenkins to 2.442 or LTS 2.426.3 or later. Then rotate anything that might have been read. Watch the logs like a night clerk with a shotgun under the counter. This is Jack Cipher, signing off from the wet end of the wire. In this city, every open port tells a story. Make sure yours has an ending you can live with.